If you're a scientist and a professional, you need to do your homework before you open your mouth. Excuse that I hear time and time again. Well, that's mostly nonsense and I don't have time to read nonsense. Well, then why are you finding the time to talk about, to argue against nonsense? Yeah. You can find the time to argue against nonsense without looking into the nonsense, but you can't find the time to research it.
Somebody like a Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I'm thinking if we were being visited, somebody would have some good footage. If we were being visited, I'm thinking maybe Google satellite images would catch spaceships that are not airplanes moving on our surface. If we were being visited, I'm thinking we'd have something better than fuzzy monochromatic video of objects that apparently reveal themselves only to Navy pilots.
The same thing over and over again, which is like no high-resolution imagery.
Are there any high-resolution pictures of quasars? I don't think so.
But they exist.
But they exist.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have high-resolution pictures of exoplanets either, yet David Kipping and I study them. Scientists, when they come to this topic, they throw their brains out the window and then open their mouths. It's maddening.
There are a lot of people that can be shepherded into bad frameworks and to not even looking at certain stigmatized topics because ideas are fashion statements and those are bad fashion. So you think of this priestly citadel as like infallible when it comes to thinking about these things. In some ways, they can be shepherded even more easily because they think they're so smart. They think they can't be tricked.
What's kind of interesting is that a lot of what they said, I sort of agree with the idea. They're just applying it in the wrong way. I do think even if you're a scientist, if you're going to comment on pseudoscience or on popular misconceptions, you need to do it from a position of understanding the pseudoscience itself. You can't just understand the science. You need to understand what people are actually saying, what are they putting forward for evidence, et cetera. That's why you need to be not just a scientist, but what we would call a scientific skeptic, right? But they're applying it to Neil deGrasse Tyson, who in this case actually knows what he's talking about, and they're doing it to back up an old UFO believer trope, this notion that critics of belief in UFOs haven't seen the evidence and they don't know what they're talking about and they haven't invested the time. It is not true, certainly not of all of the critics. So for example, I've been following the UFO story for 50 years. I've read multiple books about it, countless articles. I've looked at any evidence anyone cares to show me. I've investigated tons of individual UFO stories, and so have a lot of skeptics. And it's not even my specialty. There are skeptics who are specialists in UFO mythology and UFO lore who have incredibly deep knowledge of the UFO literature, if you will. The fact is, Tyson's point there is perfectly valid. If the Earth were being visited by alien spacecraft, you would think that over time, especially as our technology improved, as cameras have become more ubiquitous, as we have more and more satellites in orbit, etc., that at least every now and then we would capture an unambiguous picture or video of an actual alien spacecraft. But we don't have that. We do not have any smoking gun evidence. We do not have any high quality evidence. In fact, all the evidence that's put forward by the believers is, in a word, crap. It is really terrible. They don't have anything compelling. What they find compelling to me is completely low quality, ambiguous. It's the equivalent of blob squatch, right? The blurriness is the phenomenon. If these pictures or videos were in close up, good resolution, good focus, we would see that it is a bird or an airplane or something mundane, that it is not an alien spacecraft. It is the fact that you can't identify it that is the phenomenon itself. And whenever believers say, what about this case? We do have, it never pans out. They're always referring to secondhand evidence, or they're referring to evidence that has been revealed as a hoax. Because we could have AI make you a video of an alleged alien spacecraft, but you have to show that the evidence is real too. But so none of it has crossed that threshold. There is no evidence that stands up to reasonable, scientific, skeptical scrutiny. So they're just wrong. Then, of course, they fall back on we don't have a clear photo of a quasar, but we think they exist, which again is an old UFO trope. I mean, I've had, that thrown at me again for 50 years. Have you ever seen the Great Wall of China in person yourself? Well, then how do you know it really exists? So what they're saying is they don't understand how science operates and how scientific evidence works. All science is an inference to the most likely explanation, right? We are looking at all the data and saying what's the most likely explanation for all of this information that we have, all the research, all the observations, all the data. In the case of UFOs, there are competing hypotheses to the alien visitation hypothesis. There's what I call the psychocultural hypothesis. That is a cultural phenomenon due to neurological, psychological phenomenon, as well. And that is far and away the best explanation for all the evidence that's presented as evidence for space aliens, for UFOs. What we don't have is any evidence that requires there to actually be aliens visiting the Earth. For quasars, there's a reason we don't have close-up photos of quasars, because they're billions of light years away, and we have the best evidence that we can get from the instruments that we have. And we didn't just come up with the idea or believe it for no reason. Astronomers have been building a case that they exist through research and doing multiple observations, et cetera. And it is a theory that is just the one that's the best supported by all the evidence that we currently have. It would be overturned, what we think quasars are and et cetera, if a better interpretation of the data came out or new evidence came out that was inconsistent with that formulation, et cetera. So again, if we take aliens are visiting the Earth and that they are partly responsible for the UFO phenomenon as a scientific hypothesis, it is perfectly reasonable to say the evidence does not support that hypothesis. In fact, it supports the alternative hypothesis that it's just a psychological and cultural phenomenon way better. And Tyson's point that we do not have the video evidence that we probably should have if aliens were visiting the Earth is an absolutely salient one.